I had an extremely disconcerting experience late in the winter last year. I, for context, live in an extremely isolated community. The forest stretches forever around us, and the next town is closest to us is hours away. It was late December. I was out in the woods with my mother and telescoped to try and catch a glimpse of Jupiter and Saturn, in conjunction in the sky. The sun had set just below. The snow was deep. And that's when we started to hear the screaming. It was a woman's voice. She was screaming for help. I couldn't even tell if it was a human or animal at first, but eventually, I can make out the words, "Help me." But it was all so animalistic. We called the police. I went to go look for her and got totally lost. The snow was so deep, and the trail seemed to just disappear. I was hearing her voice and yelling that help was coming to try and keep shouting so that I could find her. I know the area, and I know these trails, but everything just melted away, and I felt as though I was almost being watched. Then, things got really weird. I'm getting closer and closer, hearing another voice coming from that spot. I see a flash of a fox in my peripheral vision, turn a corner, and suddenly stop. This massive red fox is standing there, staring right into my soul. I swear its eyes were almost human. The snow was too deep to get around it, and it wouldn't move at all. I screamed at it, threw snow and sticks, but it just watched me. And I swear, it could have opened its mouth and begun to speak. It wouldn't let me pass at all. I've seen so many foxes here, but I swear to God, something was different about this one, in a very disconcerting, protective way. It was like he knew me and I knew him. Then, the 911 operator called me so I could guide the police to the scene, since we were pretty far in the bush. I was lost and confused. I'm trying to find my way back, and then I see the fox again. He watches me, then slips back away into the forest. Suddenly, I see these fox tracks in the snow, and following them, I pop out of the brush within 20 meters of 2 armed police officers. The police and fire department searched into the night, finding nothing. In the spring, 2 or 3 kilometers from the site, in the opposite direction of where I heard the screams, they found what was left of a woman's body. What did I almost run into that night? And what was protecting me? After my daddy died, and I inherited the 70 acres in West Texas, I came to clear it up. This happened after a year or so of clearing out the brush and small trees. One day in October, I was clearing mesquite sprouts when everything around me began to grow silent. Every bird, cricket and such, stopped. I looked around for the cause of such a thing, but see nothing. I start walking to where I'd been cutting before it got silent, and something caught my eye about 200 feet away from me, in the direction of the front gate. It was standing there looking at me. The first thing that come to mind was a bear, and then I realized it wasn't one by its form and coloration. I stared at it for a second or two and turned to flee, but it moved with a speed I've never seen from any animal. It was on me in an instant, moving at a pace that made me wonder if this thing could move its legs faster than the human eye can see. I stopped and got down on one knee, opening fire with my .30-06, trying to hit it in the chest area, because I know where vital organs are located in animals of this size. But when I looked up, after firing 3 rounds, it wasn't coming for me anymore. It just stood there, looking at something behind me that I couldn't see, then turned and disappeared into some brush. Relieved that it had gone away, but still disturbed by what I'd seen, I returned home to get my .45, before returning to where I'd seen the thing. I was scanning through the brush with my eyes, focused on something moving towards me, when I called out for it to show itself. And it did. It stood there, looking at me for a second before walking off into some more brush. I was petrified by this experience and had no idea that coyotes could even walk bipedally like this. A year has passed since my night in New Mexico. It keeps me up almost every night, and I cannot keep it to myself anymore. For some context, I go by firm logic and usually have an explanation for everything, but this night still seems to find its way to me. I was on a 4-day trip from New Jersey to Arizona, stopping whenever I felt desperately to sleep, with my friend at the time and her mother. The last stop before we arrived was the most chilling moment of my years. The air was hot, and we had the windows down at a rest stop in the middle of the desert. My friend, who was getting high next to me, I was seconds away from sleep when I had heard it. A screech, more of a scream mixed with a growl and howl, coming from the desert behind. A rush fast enough to shake the car, moving the van next to us. Something happened. After panic, rolling the windows up and starting the car, my roommate looks at me in fear in the next seat, assuming it was her head from smoking. Right after I left the car, I had a knife tucked in my waist, like it was actually going to do something, and a high-power flashlight bright enough to light up the desert behind us. I looked out for the longest time, but saw nothing. No movement, and no noise was to be heard. Everything was just quiet. I walked around, maybe for 4 or 5 minutes, the look of fear and uncertainty across my face. I know I didn't see anything, but that call is unlike anything I've ever heard. It's nothing like a normal animal makes. It still sends me chills and keeps me up. I'm not writing this for an explanation or even someone's reasoning for it. I've tried to find the reason in it, and I can't. I'm writing this to put it out there, to almost vocalize it. There's something out there in the desert. It's not happy. My name is Brian. I believe that on September 23, 2011, I had my own experience with a skinwalker. During this time, I was 15 and living at home with my parents. On this night, I would go and spend the night at a friend's house. His dad was out of town. I can't remember what job he worked, but he always seemed to be gone. His mom was home though. We were up that night, pretty late, actually. We were playing PS2 when my friend kept telling me he was having a bad feeling. I remember looking at him funny. He just shook his head and told me, "Never mind, dude, it's probably nothing." We were playing Grand Theft Auto this night. It was now probably about 1 or 2 in the morning. He starts to get really pale. Now, I'm worried about him because he's acting funny. He goes to get some Mountain Dew out of the fridge and comes running back to the living room. His eyes are wider than I've ever seen them. There's something outside the window, he tells me. I drop the controller, jump up and go to see what he's talking about. I didn't see anything. I told him he was tripping, and we got back to playing. Halfway through the game, my friend gets up again and goes outside for a smoke. Yeah, he kind of had a bad cigarette habit at a young age. I begin to play again, when, all of a sudden, I hear something that almost made me jump out of my skin. It sounded like someone had just yelled into the house from right behind me. I turn around quickly, but only see the window pane against the wall next to me. I tell myself it was probably just some noise from outside, or something. Maybe one of those neighborhood cats. I'm doing an important mission in GTA, when my friend, who comes in all pale, tells me again he heard something outside. I'm trying my best to play it cool at this point. I tell him I heard the noise too. I want to agree with him, but not scare the poor man. We just continue to ignore it the best we can. About an hour or so later, we both start to feel it. This strange, creepy feeling, like we were both being watched by someone or something. We weren't sure what to make of it all. Finally, at around 3:30 in the morning, I start to hear my name being called outside. It was ever so faint, but it was for sure my name. My friend stops and looks at me. "Dude, are you hearing this?" Now I'm pale. It sounded like this raspy, scratchy voice. We both jump up, grab hold of the nearest kitchen knives like we were expecting a serial killer to come invade our house. We just wait, watching the back door. Nothing happens for about 10 minutes or so. It's now 3:45, and I keep hearing my name being called from outside. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went outside to investigate, while my friend stayed inside. When I get outside, I don't see anything at first until I look toward the trees by our house. There, standing in the shadows, is this dark figure. It's just staring at me, and I'm trying my best not to piss myself out of fear. As soon as it sees that I see him, he starts moving away from me, into the darkness of the trees. Without wasting any time, I run back inside out of sheer terror. My friend is right by the door, knife in hand and at the ready. He asks me what happened, and I told him exactly what I saw. We were both practically about to defecate in that moment. The figure that I saw was far too big to be a person. It just had this evil aura or feeling around it. It's hard to explain. We were both so scared. We stayed up until morning came, at the ready to stab or kill anything that walked through his doors. His mom found us huddled up together by the back door, knives in hand, and just laughed. We didn't dare tell her what happened last night. We tried to play it off like we just got scared and thought we might have heard someone trying to break in. The only thing I know is that this friend of mine lives near a reservation, or so I'm told. I know skinwalkers are native by nature, so I'm not sure how much of this is directly related to that. It makes you wonder though. This has been my only experience ever with the paranormal. So, I went over to my friend's house, and he lives close to the national forest. We decided to start a fire and just relax for a bit outside. He had to go see what his sister was doing and walked off. I stayed, watched the fire. It slowly died to embers in about 5 minutes after he left. It was a blazing fire, and no way it should have went out that fast. So, it goes out, I put on music, and I begin to hear almost like joints popping, like bubble wrap. I thought nothing of it, but it kept getting closer. I turn around with my flashlight and see this creature with no ears, eyes, or mouth, basically like the rake. I jump, drop my phone, quickly run to my free porch and look back. It just stares at me, and I see its fingers reach around the tree. Fingers easily 8 inches or longer. Then, it bolts off. It was so deformed, it ran like a cheetah. Without making noises, of course. I tell my friend, and we go looking for his sister, and hear noises like voices and animals around us. We also keep seeing things. We get them, and they don't believe us. We walk back to the house. Everything seems fine, but after a while, my back feels hit, and aches a little as well. We lift up my shirt, and there are scratch marks, but no blood. It looked almost like whip marks, and me and my friend are serious nail biters. I did not feel any pain while we were looking. This is possibly the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I'll post my back scratches, and the odd part, my shirt was not ripped. My friend said he had seen that creature twice. Not sure if it is a skinwalker, but if the best thing you can do to match it. His dad has never seen it either, but hears stuff all the time, and the animals will start freaking out whenever it's around. His sister says we are messing with them, and I don't really care to have a clear conscience of finding them. Also, I have tried to walk about 3 miles at 2 in the morning. I'm also 250 pounds. My fat butt is not doing this for fun if I see danger. I also am working on my weight, so I'm glad I wasn't 300 like I once was. This sighting of mine happened back in the later 90s. Times were so different. No one cared about your race. No one cared about your political affiliation. Simple, the time that so many of us wish we could go back to. Me and a buddy were playing basketball, just shooting hoops. He tells me he wants to go and show me something cool. I followed him a few miles away. It looks like we're walking through this large empty, open field. I ask him, what gives? He smirks. He tells me that this very field, very long ago, used to be a large Indian burial ground. Apparently, when settlers came through here, the graves were exhumed and the bodies are now gone. Their spirits still very much stay active. This is when he started telling me about skinwalkers and how dangerous they are. This is when he explains that an ancient evil exists here and that his grandparents were very serious about the time he spent here. He wanted to make sure that I knew what was here. He asked me if I would come out here at night with him. I regret it now, but I agreed in this moment. Skinwalkers apparently came to this field at night, guarding what bodies they thought were still here. It all sounded so interesting and intriguing. I couldn't help but go along with his little scheme after all. Later that night, after dinner, we head out to the field. We decided to stay in my car for a little bit before starting the investigation. I have no idea what I was thinking at this time. The drive over there gave me ample time to think about whether or not this is a good idea. My friend wakes up from his slumber and tells me that he'll go ahead on foot around the perimeter of the field, just to make sure that nothing watches us from afar. He makes his way through all of this open space until disappearing behind some brush off in the distance. I start up my car and drive slowly towards one end of the border of this huge cemetery-like area. After getting close enough, I stop right away as to not be noticed. I see my friend waving at me from behind a tree stump. He motions for me to park my car and come up alongside him. After parking the car, I walk through shoulder-high grass towards where he stands. I make it all of the way over there and stand next to him. He mentions something about hearing someone or something walking around in the dark around us. Of course, we try ignoring this notion and talk about other things until we hear this squelch sound interrupting our conversation. From far away, but also moving closer with each second that passes by, is this noise that doesn't seem like any animal I've heard before. We look back into the field and you can see something bounding towards us. He panics. He tells me it's a skinwalker and we need to get the heck out of here. I was so caught up in this moment and had no time to react as fast as he did. He grabbed my arm and started running back towards the car. The sound is getting closer. Just as I catch up to him, we both start sprinting towards my car until we're side by side with one another, trying our hardest not to look behind us at the same time. As we're nearing closer to my car, I can hear whatever it is getting closer to us. I am nearly out of breath, but he still has that energy to get back into the car. Once we're both in the car, I quickly lock my door and start up the car, hoping that whatever it was simply wasn't fast enough to catch up with us yet. We get out of there, hopefully for good this time around. We thought we were in the clear when we pulled over at a gas station. Soon after, you can see in my rear view mirror this black figure chasing after our car again. After getting back on the road, we notice that this creature is keeping pace with us, no matter how fast or slow we drive away from it. I start panicking when it appears right next to me in my passenger's seat. Fortunately, the creature ends up disappearing again. As we continue our drive down the road, we can see it making its way alongside us on foot at this point in time. At first glance, it looks like a black dog with glowing red eyes and an elongated jaw, filled with razor-sharp teeth, holding itself up by two front legs that almost looked human. After that moment passes through us, we realize this is some sort of shape-shifting demon. We would later learn it was a skinwalker. Completely terrorized and panic-stricken, we hit the gas and go even faster. The figure eventually disappears, and we decided to go back to his place. We chug Rockstar energies and do as much research as we can that night while trying to make sense of us almost getting murdered by an evil spirit guardian. We believe it was a skinwalker. I have no other speculations about what we saw. My friend thinks so too. Hello. So, this happened when I was around 15. I'm 19 now. I'm still thinking about this day, but to this day, I never knew what it was, and I was hoping for some answers. So, it's around 3:30 in the morning, in Greenville, North Carolina. I live in a little neighborhood in a rural area, surrounded by woods. Wildlife here is common. I can hear my dog barking from upstairs, so I go up, and I see her staring out the window. I don't see anything, so I go outside the front porch. In my yard was a mangy-looking coyote or fox. It was too dark to see. The only way I could tell was the streetlights. It had no hair on its tail, and it was very thin. It looked sickly. It had hair missing from its face as well. I yell at it to get going. I'm tired and my dogs are yapping. And it just doesn't leave. It lingers around for a while, and I'm 15 and stupid. So I decide to scare it off by getting closer to it. And then the scariest thing happens. It stands up on its hind legs. And its legs were unnaturally long, deer-like. They looked like they were backwards. It occurred to me that this wasn't exactly normal. Thinking about it now, it looked more deer-like when it stood up, but looked canine-like when it was on all fours. If it was, it changed forms. It sprints off on its hind legs like a human, taking huge steps, running off near the train tracks by my house. It stopped sprinting midway under the streetlight to look at me, and I noped out of there. Its eyes stopped glowing when it stood up too, and its ears changed when it stood up. It looked more deer-like as well, but I swear it was a canine, big fox ears, but that it was also almond-shaped like a deer's. Anyway, sorry for the story. It just really freaked me out, and I cannot find any information on what it could possibly be. This sounds like nonsense, but I know what I saw. I will never forget that night. Also, my dog did not stop barking till 6. My friend and I were driving back from Southern California, and we decided to take the long way home, so we could see some of Utah. We spent most of our time just talking about our mutual interests. As midnight approached, we crossed over into Utah and started heading east towards Salt Lake City. Driving down a lonely stretch of road, there was nothing but pavement all around us for miles, with no houses or buildings in sight, just highway, and the occasional car we would pass. We had been driving for hours, with little talk between us, as we both grew tired. I remember it being very foggy out that night, like a thick mist was surrounding the car, as I drove along this dark stretch of road. My friend's name is Frank, and he was sitting in the passenger seat, looking out the window to his right. I was staying focused on the road, but I noticed Frank had gone silent and was staring at something outside the car, with a look of terror on his face. As we were driving by, it came into view, walking alongside the highway towards us. It looked like a skinny man, wearing all black tribal clothes, carrying an axe over its shoulder, as it walked alongside of us, walking northbound on southbound lanes, all while completely ignoring us, as we drove down the road beside him, passing him slowly. For some reason, this creature never crossed any of the yellow lines, or dashed across road, dodging cars, even though there was no traffic that night, and we didn't see another living soul, except for us, and the thing in black. When we passed it, I looked back at it from my rearview mirror to see if it was still walking down the highway behind us, or if it crossed any of the lanes or dashed into the surrounding forest, but it was gone. It just disappeared. In a normal situation, you would think you were seeing things out of the corner of your eye, but since there were two of us watching this creature, going down a completely empty stretch of road, during a foggy night, where nothing else could have been hiding in all that darkness, hidden from sight, we both know for a fact this was no man in tribal clothing, wearing a mask with an axe over his shoulder, standing beside a lonely stretch of highway, on an empty dark night. There was no one else out in that part of Utah that night. I still can't explain what we saw, but it wasn't human, and my friend is still freaked out about this to this day. So, me and two of my buddies were up Lone Peak Canyon, with a plan to sleep under the stars and leave the very next day. So, we got everything set up and decided to go swim in the lake. On our way back, we saw a single deer with abnormally large eyes and ears. It had odd proportions in general too. I've grown up here in Utah, in the valley, my entire life. I have seen thousands of deer, so I know what they usually look and act like. The deer was sitting on a rock like a dog. It turned its head to watch us without giving any reaction. Its head seemed to turn and follow while its body stayed perfectly still. It almost looked like its head was detached from its body. I decided that it was just an odd occurrence and that I should just ignore it. This was at 4 p.m. About 30 minutes later, while we were at our campsite, we saw the same deer chasing another, but it stopped and continued just to look at us for maybe 5 more minutes. When we all looked away, it almost just disappeared. Maybe it took off as soon as we looked away, but this was also odd. 30 minutes after that, we saw the same deer, probably 200 yards away up on the side of the hill overlooking us. It stayed there for at least 45 minutes just staring at us. The 4th time we saw it was later, right around 9:30 p.m. We were in our sleeping bags getting ready to go to bed. The deer came up the river where we were next to, probably only 20 feet away, and just looked at us, very strangely. Then, about 15 minutes later, the same thing happened yet again. It almost seemed to be checking in if we had gone to sleep yet. How creepy. It continued to check on us one more time. At this point, I was now a little freaked out, but I didn't want to say anything. I was afraid my friends would say I was imagining things. So, we all tried to go to bed, and about 10:30 to 10:45 p.m., we began hearing something maybe 10 feet away, just under the hill that led to where the river was. We continued to hear what sounded like a deer walking in the river, coming to check on us. Every time it would get close, we would start talking, shining our lights into the trees to see if we could see anything. This happened enough to the point that we grabbed everything and left right at midnight. On our way down, my buddies claimed they could see silhouettes off to our sides. The entire way down, we kept seeing weird things, like a deer right next to the road, staring at the mountainside at literally nothing, not moving or reacting or grazing. We continued to see more and more. They were behaving so oddly. But remember that all we've seen thousands of deer just up that canyon itself. They have never behaved like that. Please let me know if anybody might be interested in thinking it's a skinwalker. Okay, so this happened to me about 6 years ago now. A lot of people I've talked to have had strange things happen, but nothing as scary as going up against a skinwalker. We were living in this trailer at the time, when, one night, I'm laying down in my bed when I hear this noise outside. It sounds like a dog yelping or something out there. It seemed to be getting closer and closer. I could hear the rattle of the chain on that dog as it went by, like something was dragging it. I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? I grab my rifle, and I go outside, but there's nothing around. I hear this noise again, and I look up, and it sounds like a woman laughing. Then again, but closer. It sounded like it was coming from the hills. My heart starts racing, and I yell out who's there. Just laughing. I was too creeped out to investigate any further. Things were feeling like I was in a darn horror movie. So, I went back inside. The laughing continued and kept me up for a while afterwards, but I don't really remember it anymore. The next morning, we go out to the barn and see our dog dead. He was laying there in the sun, stiff. We checked his body. Something had snapped his neck. My wife and I wept. We loved him very much, and now he was gone. We later found large bipedal tracks. These lead right up to the barn where our dog was sleeping from the sage grass. The same direction where I heard the laughing coming from. I'm pretty sure we were dealing with a Navajo witch, or something along the lines of evil. I asked a priest and a medicine to bless our trailer. After that, for a while, things seemed to calm down. Only for a period of time. Then, we started having problems again. We would hear banging on the door and scratching at it, trying to get in. I'm not kidding. I'll never forget that sound. I would just repeat prayers every time we were in there. Anyways, we sold the place and moved away soon after that incident. The Skinwalker came with us for a short while, but eventually left. I really do think it was possessed of some kind of evil spirit, maybe even the witch who died in the hills nearby, or something. I did a lot of research later, and found out that there were some sightings nearby from other people too. I can't really say for sure, but I know what I saw, and I am pretty damn certain that it was a Navajo witch. I'm a 17-year-old male in Texas, a little northeast of San Antonio. Now, from what I've heard, they do not hunt in my region. I don't know if this is false. If somebody knows otherwise, please say so. A brief description of what I saw in my first encounter was a pale or light peach color humanoid that was roughly 4 feet tall. Its face lacked a mouth, had more like snake-like slits for nostrils. Its eyes, though, were the most startling. They weren't eyes per se, but more like an absence of light, like a bottomless pit of existence. The further you looked in it, it was like an abyss of light that did not let out any. On my second encounter, my friends and I were traditional hobo tonight. Now, a hobo night was an occasional Friday night our friend group would spend walking about, talking, sleeping on the streets. Yeah, I know this sounds dumb. It humbles oneself. It makes you appreciate what you have. For legality's sake, I'll leave out the rest. This particular night, we were staying in a wooded area. My entire body tensed up with fear and adrenaline. After hearing heavy steps near us, I'm not one to be scared easily, due to a really screwed up childhood, but that is a story all to itself. Anyway, I was shaking. It was hunting that night. It got really close and did not make a lot of noise. My group had 3 guys and a girl. Now, for a personal sake, I don't want to say names. It was enough, though, to wake us up. We all ended up leaving. When we were all almost to the main road, me and the girl who were there saw a similar-looking creature running across the field on 2 legs, back into the forest at a blinding speed. Not a minute later, we heard an animal scream. The noise did not sound right, almost like it ran through a distortion program that was naturally created. What can I do for protection? Also, my best friend, whom I moved in with, has told me he's had multiple instances of hearing a creature that made the same noise. He called it nerve-wracking, like a distorted bird call, maybe a high-pitched distorted bark. It was always the same noise. He knew it was watching him from 8 yards away. He couldn't see it, ever. The only reason I know he is not lying is because he heard it tonight. My girlfriend heard it too. It either hunts in packs or can travel fast and silent. We heard the same noise multiple times. Also, my stepmom has heard it too. My best friend's little brother has heard it. He's 15. My little brother's best friend has also heard it. We live right on top of a cave. I didn't think to mention until now. The entrance has, from what I've heard, never been found. I saw it again last night. I was kissing my girlfriend goodnight, and goodbye. I heard this right behind me. It sounded like a body hitting the ground. I immediately got hairs that stood up on my back. I told her to go. The faster, the better. When I turned, I saw for maybe a half second. The realization hit me hard. Its skin seemed to reflect on the light, while its eyes absorbed almost all of it. I hope this last update. After my girlfriend did some research, we come across a few articles of the kitsune, like spirits that are embodiments of intelligence. They could be anywhere from malevolent to benevolent. Originally, I felt scared, almost like I was being hunted. One of my other friends is a Wiccan. I know creatures like this demand respect. She recommended I lift out milk as a sign of peace. Talking to the creature directly, after that night, any malevolence I feel is now gone, though I still feel like I'm being watched.